Just past midnight between Ashfork and Seligman, I pulled over by a battered, historic Route 66 sign. The wind rose, dust sailed, and for a heartbeat I saw a pale tent and an idling car in the dark dot asterisk I like driving at night. It cleans my mind in a way daylight never manages. Cheaper than therapy, quieter than bars, and the lane markers talk to you in their own rhythm. That night, I was westbound on the old road, the threadbare ribbon of Route 66 between Ashfork and Seligman. The interstate hummed somewhere unseen. I wanted the dry bed, the part of the map where people forget to look, dot. The asphalt was crazed with sun cracks and patched potholes. My headlights combed a wavering tunnel through creosote and yucca, and every so often a leaning sign shouldered, out of the dark with a spray of bullet pits. I pulled to the shoulder by one that said, Historic Route 66, metal bent, stickers half peeled. I killed the engine. The silence snapped shut, dot. What hit me first was the smell, hot iron and dust. Then the sense that something else had stopped with me. Way out over the Aubrey Valley, the moon was sliced thin by traveling clouds. I told myself I only stepped out to stretch, dot. Then the flicker, a shred of white where the ditch met the fence. Phone flashlight on, I found a torn grocery bag tangled in barbed wire. Ordinary trash, but in the sand was a clean, straight groove. 2 feet long, like a tire had slid and been dragged aside by something stronger. I touched the lip of it. The ground felt refrigerator cold, just in that strip, dot. And then it came. The small, unmistakable sound of a zipper being tugged. Quick, soft, a tent door opening. There was only scrub, no fabric to catch the light. I told myself it was wind on wire. But back at the car, I sat with my feet in the gravel and lit a cigarette I'd promised not to have. The map showed a blue dot on gray. No services. But this stretch keeps its own ledger. I'd read about a family who pulled off to camp near here in the early 60s. Parents in the car, kids in a canvas tent. The records get vague about the end. Locals still talk about the zipper. You hear the sound first, you look second. You wish you hadn't. Across the road, a ring of black stones marked an old fire. I crouched and ran my fingers through ash-stained dust. Patterns curved there like fingerprints. At the edge was a small, round depression, too tidy for coyote or deer, exactly like the pressed toe of a child's boot. I widened it with my thumb and felt stupid, as if erasing a name, dot back in the driver's seat. I let the dog sit with me. In that vacuum of sound, the zipper rasped again, closer this time, like it came from the back seat. I spun around, elbow smashing the door. Empty, but the air smelled like canvas, hot dust and old soap, the breath of every childhood tent. I snapped the headlights on. The wash of light flattened the roadside. For a moment the air trembled, and the outline of a small A-frame tent bloomed where the ash ring lay. Not solid, just a heat shimmer shape. The flap lifted. Something shifted inside, dot. The starter caught. I should have left the valley to its dead and its stories. But a quarter-mile ahead, a car rolled out of the brush and nosed onto the blacktop without headlights. Boxy, low, early 60s profile, chrome hinted in the glare. It crossed the beam, silver and wrong. I flashed my brights. No response. The car drifted forward, then stopped, straddling both lanes. The driver's door cracked open and a shadow moved, too narrow for a grown man, too tall for a kid. The door settled shut without a slam dot. For a breath, the desert went noiseless. Then my radio popped on by itself with a drag of static. Buried in it was a voice I couldn't place, low and flat, repeating one word. Move. I checked the dial. The radio wasn't on. I eased forward, ready to swing wide. The plate looked like a smear of tin. Through the rear window, I saw outlines. 2 headrests, a heap of blanket, and a vertical line between them like a lantern handle. Camping lantern, canvas tent, zipper. The mind does this, building bridges you don't want to dot. At 20 feet, the brake lights flared. The trunk rose half an inch, then settled. In my beams, the paint showed a faded teal, the color from old family, the photos. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out with his back to me, hands at his sides. Dress pants, white shirt, shoulders bowed as if he carried both children at once. He didn't turn. He raised one hand, palm out. Stop! I froze without meaning to dot. He dropped his hand and vanished as the door eased itself shut. The sedan rolled forward, threaded into the shoulder, and sank into the brush without sound. The night closed behind it. I sat there, heart tripping. In the mirror, the tent was gone. The ash ring was just rocks, and yet the air still smelled like canvas and cold. I turned toward Seligman and let the speed climb. Neon bled onto the pavement of a late-night gas station. The clerk sat behind glass with a paperback. He took one look at me and put a finger in his book to hold the page. "You okay?" he asked. "I heard a tent zipper," I said, hating the way it sounded, "and saw a car with no lights. Out on the old road. You pulled off by the valley," he said. "Aubrey," I said. Dottie nodded, like at a bad joke he already knew. "Sometimes the wire fence sings. Sometimes the army runs night stuff up north. You know how it is." "I know wind," I said, "and reflections." He watched me, decided something. My uncle worked highway patrol when more of 66 was open. Family stopped to camp in the 60s. Dad drove, Mom shotgun, kids in a little tent. Morning comes. Patrol finds the car on the shoulder, doors closed, radio hissing. The tent is zipped. Only it isn't. He tapped the counter once. Paper was thin on details. People weren't. "What happened?" He shrugged. "Depends who tells it. All bad. Folks say sometimes you hear the zipper before you see anything, like the desert is opening from the wrong side." He slid me a bottle of water I hadn't asked for. "You look like you need it." At the motel, the air conditioner rattled like beads in a can. I finally slept and woke at 3:26 to fabric moving. I lay still, counting heartbeats. A zipper ran 3 inches up and 3 inches down on the other side of the door, like someone testing whether I wanted to know them. I didn't look. When dawn rinsed the lot, there was a fresh groove in the dust, 2 feet long, leading from my door to the edge of the asphalt, and then to nothing at all. I went back to the valley in daylight because I don't like being bullied by ideas. The sign looked smaller in sun. The fence held its bag, flapping harmless white. I found the groove from the night before. In daylight, it was a nothing scratch. But when I laid my palm to it, the strip of earth was still cold. I told myself, would stick to the interstate from now on, that I would stop chasing rumors. Then I reached back for my overnight duffel on the rear seat. The zipper slider sat dead center, teeth meshed perfectly on both sides. I had left it all the way to the edge dot. It could have been housekeeping. It could have been me. It could have been any sane thing. But when I merged onto the highway and glanced at the empty desert, the radio crackled without a station, and a man's voice came through, plain as a prayer. Move. I did, and I don't drive that stretch after dark anymore. There are places where the past keeps its tent staked tight beside the road, where the canvas sighs and the zipper whispers, and if you wait long enough, a father will step from a teal car, raise a hand, and out of mercy, ask you to stop. I left Santa Rosa too late on purpose. The desert feels honest after midnight, and the old two-lane that still calls itself Route 66 has a way of stripping your head clean. I could have taken the interstate and been into Kamkari before the coffee burned, but I stayed with the cracked asphalt, the leaning billboards, the ghost motels pretending their vacancy signs matter. My silver Civic becomes a dark hole when the sun is gone. That night, it felt like a lifeboat on a black ocean with mile markers for stars. 60 is the speed where thoughts unspool, but you still notice details. Window cracked an inch for sage and hot rubber, radio off because static makes me feel watched. The sky lowered until it was more a lid than a ceiling. I saw the headlights in the rear view as a pin, then a pair of pins, two steady stars drilling toward me. Relief hit first. Company on the road means the world is still working. I kept my speed and waited for the car to resolve. Grill, corners, roofline. The lights ballooned the way distant things do just before they separate into something that passes dot. They didn't separate. They went out. Dot 1, beat 2, 3, empty ribbon behind me. No ramps, no ranch drive, just fence wire and weeds the wind, combed flat. Crest, I said, as if naming it turned it into geography instead of a problem. 2 miles later they were back, exactly back, like a paused movie punched to life. This time they ran up too fast, punching white into the cabin, bleaching my knuckles on the wheel. My foot tensed for the brake and I forced it off. In the mirror the lights slurred, then snapped out as if someone tugged a plug. Okay, I said, and heard how thin I sounded. I put the radio on for proof of normal. Clean hiss, then a clipped syllable that might have been a voice warming up. I spun the dial through stations that didn't exist and shut it off. The third time they didn't play coy. They rose behind me, steady as a metronome, and held position like a tailgater with a point. I signaled and eased onto the shoulder. Hazards, blinking, gravel whispering under my tires. I waited for the rush of a pass, the whoop of air. My shoulders braced for the impact you can feel in your molars. Nothing. Empty highway, empty desert, wind moving across scrub. I stepped out because I am occasionally stupid. The night had that brittle silence that makes you think you're hearing. Electricity. Off to the right, a white wooden cross stood in a hump of river stones, ribbon bleached to bone, plastic flowers crisped into paper. A memorial. Every road out here has them, but this one felt like a throat clearing. I didn't walk closer, but back in the car I told myself the stop would break the pattern. It didn't. The lights returned 5 minutes later and began to pace me in a way I couldn't map. They weren't always behind. Sometimes the passenger glass caught a sliver of brightness, the kind of reflection you get when another lane ghosts along yours. Sometimes the glow lifted high enough in the mirror that it felt above the road. Always the same silence. No engine, no tires, no Doppler sweep of anything that obeys physics. The last stretch into Tucumcari is flat. You can see a tower winking red, and the smear of neon that promises coffee and a key. That's where the lights stopped vanishing. They stayed. They pressed in. They filled the mirror until it was all light. I flicked the signal and drifted right, and the glow moved with me like I had a trailer I didn't own. I kept it at 50, at 45. The lights grew until I could feel heat on my neck that had to be in my head. I whispered, "No." And that, finally, is when they died. Cleanly. All at once, like a hand over a mouth. In the after-image, I watched my own hollowed-out face and didn't recognize it. Tucumcari saved me by existing. I took the first diner and parked so close I could have reached the door in a fall. Inside smelled like coffee and a mop. A woman topped my cup without asking and didn't smile when I tried to apologize for being there, all nerves and road. "You came in from the east?" she said. "Yeah." "Lights?" My throat clicked. I nodded. She looked at my hands instead of my eyes. "Ben, happening since before I learned to drive. People say Rex left echoes. People say the air layer's wrong and Ben's headlights from the interstate. Doesn't matter which one's prettier. You want eggs?" At the end of the counter, an older man with a patrolman's back said, "My brother wrote 3 words on a photo he kept." Something made me stop. He sipped his coffee. He was running code one night in 78. Saw nothing but 2 white discs. Thought they were a speeder. They vanished. He pulled over to figure how a car evaporates. 30 seconds later, a Plymouth without lights blew by and ate a culvert. If he'd kept going, they'd have met. I ate half the eggs, paid, booked a room at a neon motel that still gives you a metal key on a diamond tag. The clerk said, "If you hear gravel after you lock up, don't open. Folks think they're being neighborly, and then we're mopping." I took it as gallows humor until 3 a.m. when tires whispered over the lot, slow and deliberate, and a narrow seam of white slid under my door like a blade. It stayed there long enough for me to learn I could stop breathing for 37 seconds. When I finally looked through the peephole, the lot was empty and hot, heat shimmering like low water. Dawn is loud in the desert. Birds remember they exist. Trucks go back to being trucks instead of ideas. I drove east again because I didn't like leaving a fear behind me untethered. The cross looked smaller at 7. Someone had tucked a chipped Matchbox car into the stones. Mid-60s shape, paint scuffed off the edges, a toy kept in a pocket until it looked carried through 3 summers. On the way back, I saw a faint ox of skid, where tires had panicked toward the shoulder and lost the argument. You wouldn't clock them at speed, but once you do, you can't unsee the geometry. A bend that looks straight, a dip that looks harmless, a line that ends in gravel. I followed it with my eyes to the spot where I'd first pulled aside because something behind me insisted on existing. Depending on your mood, the light saved me or tried to teach me how not to be saved. People ask if I think it was a haunting or a trick of light. I say yes. The desert can bend beams from a highway you can't see. Pain can bend a road you thought you knew into a loop. Physics and grief share a house out here. Some nights they borrow each other's clothes. I took the I would see you interstate when I left, folding into the morning stream of trucks and commuters. Every so often, even now, a pair of lights will appear in my mirror too fast, and then be gone when I check a second time. My hands go cold on the wheel, and I taste metal. I don't look for memorials, and I don't say the words out loud, but I do keep a scrap of paper in my wallet with 3 I didn't write first, because sometimes you don't need originality to live through the night. Something made me stop. I was westbound through Arizona, aiming for Kingman before midnight. The stretch between Sitgreaves Pass and Oatman is the kind of road that still wears the bones of Route 66 like a badge. Narrow, twisting, no guardrails worth a damn. I'd driven it before in daylight when burros block traffic and tourists take photos. At night, it's different. The mountains close in, the road hugs cliffs, and the silence turns heavy enough to bend your thoughts. The Civic's engine hummed faithfully, but my shoulders were tight on the wheel. Switchback after switchback unrolled in my headlights, shadows jerking left and right. No cell service, no towns, just rock and sky. I told myself I'd be in Kingman within the hour, showered, asleep. That's when I saw him. A figure by the roadside, right where the grade pitched downward. A man, tall, shoulders stooped, one arm out with his thumb angled toward the sky. Every instinct told me to keep going. Picking up strangers in the middle of nowhere at midnight is Darwin Award behavior, but something in the way he stood made me ease the car to the shoulder dot. He was older, maybe late 50s, hair flattened to his skull, a pale button-down shirt tucked into dark pants. Dust clung to him like second skin. When he slid into the passenger seat, the cabin smelled of sweat and asphalt. His voice was low and flat. "Thanks. Headed west." "Kingman," I said. He nodded once, eyes forward. The kind of man who doesn't waste syllables. I pulled back onto the road, tires crunching gravel. For a few minutes, silence. Then he spoke again. "Dangerous road. Lot of accidents here. People take it too fast. Don't make the curves." I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. His words felt less like conversation and more like a warning delivered on behalf of the asphalt itself. Another mile. I risked a glance at him. His hands rested flat on his thighs, nails broken and rimmed dark. His gaze was fixed on the windshield, unblinking. I asked where he was headed. "Doesn't matter," he said. The temperature in the car dipped. My breath fogged faintly on the glass, though outside it was still desert warm. My gut turned cold. I took the next curve carefully, tires hugging the inside line. My headlights swung across the rock wall, and for a moment caught something pale, a crumpled shape just beyond the shoulder. Cloth? Metal? It vanished in the beam's edge. "See?" the hitchhiker murmured. "Lot of wrecks." Gooseflesh prickled down my arms. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep the speed steady. A few bends later, the smell hit me. Gasoline and burnt rubber, strong enough to make my eyes water. But the road ahead was clear. No sign of fire, no wreckage. I glanced toward the passenger seat. Empty. My stomach dropped. I slammed the brakes and the car fishtailed before halting sideways across the lane. The seatbelt dug into my chest. Passenger. Door still shut. No trace anyone had been there. Dot breathing hard. I pulled to the shoulder and killed the engine. The night pressed in. Absolute. Then I heard it. The faint squeal of tires, the crunch of metal folding, a scream swallowed in an instant, echoes with no source. The sound rose from the canyon below and then bled away, leaving only the rasp of my pulse. I forced myself back onto the road, driving slower now, hands trembling. The mountains eventually parted, and Kingman's sodium glow spread on the horizon. I didn't stop until I rolled into the motel lot and killed the lights dot inside the lobby. The clerk, an older woman with desert-worn eyes, studied my face. "Rough drive?" she asked. "Picked up a hitchhiker," I muttered, realizing how insane it sounded. "But he disappeared." She didn't blink. "Tall man, white shirt, smells like gas?" My throat dried out. "Yeah," she sighed. "You're not the first. Folks say a man died on Sitgreaves Pass in the 70s. Car went over. They never pulled it out whole. People still see him thumbing rides. Sometimes he gets in. Sometimes he warns them. Sometimes he just stares until he's gone." Her words fell like stones. I took the key, locked myself in the room, and sat awake until dawn, every creak of the walls sounding like a door opening .2. This day, when I drive that stretch, I keep my eyes forward. If someone stands at the roadside, arm raised, I don't stop. Because on Route 66 through the Black Mountains, some passengers never reach their destination.